Yeah,
Live streaming.
I just turned it on.
All right. Okay. We're meeting for the January quarterly meeting, Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'm calling it to order. Members of the committee are hereby advised of their duty under the State Ethics Act to avoid conflicts of interest and appearance of conflicts. They're instructed to refrain from participating in any matter coming before the committee with respect to which there is a conflict of interest or appearance of conflict, and I don't expect that there would be any among the committee members. The first item under tab 1 is the consideration of proposed minutes of the meeting of the committee from October the 20th of 2020. And do I have a motion to accept those minutes? And seconded by Marcy. And all in favor, just say aye. I don't think we have enough members to worry about. Aye. So the minutes are accepted. The second item is the consideration of the State Bar's fourth quarter financial statements. I hope you had a chance to take a look at those. I did talk to Alice. Alice is going to briefly just give a brief introduction of those financial statements, and then we have an action item that we need to take up.
And I did executive director notes, and I'm just going to kind of repeat my main statement in there, which is, 2020 ended up being a good financial year for the State Bar, although it wasn't a good financial year for our country or the population. But the consequence of the COVID-19 shutdown was that we saved money across the board on expenses, with the exception of personnel expenses, because we kept our full complement of employees fully employed for the year, still doing their work. They were just doing it remotely. So I'm not going to go through item by item. The bottom line is that we actually brought in revenues that exceeded what we had budgeted, just slightly, but did exceed what we had budgeted. And then on the expense end of things, our expenditures were 90% of what we had budgeted. And all those savings, I guess you call them savings, went to the bottom line. So instead of the net deficit we had projected, and that was after we had capital expenditures and paid the principal on the mortgage, we projected that we would be 183,000 in the red. Instead, we were 1.1 million to the plus side of things. There's a couple of reasons for that go beyond COVID. The main one on the capital expenditures was we had budgeted for starting this database software project in 2020. We didn't actually get the contract signed until the fall, and they didn't really start the substantive work until they're starting it right now. And our first payments to ThoughtSpan, which is the contractor, are not due until I think the end of this month. So the money that we had budgeted to get that project underway as a capital expenditure, that didn't happen. So that's part of the story there. But a lot of it is just COVID. And I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have about anything. My executive director note that we had 3 items we were over budget on, slightly over budget on publications, nothing really significant there, 1% over budget. On the managed services, we were 25% over budget. And the reason for that was that once we went to remote work, we really had to beef up the whole system of communication between employees and our network. And we had to ensure that that was done securely. There was a lot of questions about accessing the cloud for our information in the cloud. And so we simply had to spend more money to ensure that the employees could safely, and by safely, I mean, from a cybersecurity perspective, safely work from home. So that's what the cost was there. And then the other item in which we were the most over budget was on these bank service charges that we're going to talk about later in this meeting. These are the charges that we pay to BB&T for people using credit cards to pay their dues payment, primarily their dues payment online. And those are increasing, not because the charge itself is increasing, but because more and more lawyers are paying by credit card online, they want to be able to pay that way. Even despite those costs, which in 2020 were over $200,000, even despite that, it still remains the most effective and efficient way for us to collect these dues. So we want to continue to enable it. But as you'll see in this item we're talking about at the end of the agenda, we need to look at some ways to possibly recoup those fees. So my request to you is that you approve the 3 items in which we were over budget, and that you approve the 2020 year-end financials overall.
Thank you. Peter, do you want to admit Clara Mills?
I have. It just took a little while for her to get in. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so the action item is that we need to have a motion with regards to approving the overages for publication 1%, managed services 25%, and bank services fee by 35%. Do I have a motion to approve and accept those overages?
So moved.
All right. Second by Marcy. Any discussion? Any questions of Alice about that? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All, I think that's unanimous then. The third item is this coming year state bar budget, the 2021 state bar budget.
Darren,
Yes.
I'm going to interrupt you. We also need to approve the year-end financials overall, not just the
sorry.
overages.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the year-end fourth quarter financial statements of the state bar? Colin?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Marcy? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those are approved. I'm sorry. Moving on to state bar 2021 budget. Alice, you want to give us a brief rundown on that?
So the 2021 budget is not all that different than the 2020 budget. And I'm saying budget purposefully. The one thing that is different is that we have discounted those items that we anticipate we will have reduced expenses for the first part of 2021, really mostly through April. So it's things like travel expenses, attending conferences that we know are canceled in the first part of the year, and those kinds of things. Otherwise, we've assumed it's going to be a fairly regular year. On the revenue side of things, you'll note that the revenue that we're projecting in the budget is less than our actuals for 2020. We do that on purpose. We try to be conservative in our projections. There's also a couple of items that are different from 2020 and 2021 on the revenue end of things. First of all, the CLE contribution to LAP. We base that on an average over the years. Usually it's more than what we budget, but we start out with an assumption that it's going to be, something that less than the preceding year, which is what we've budgeted. Advertising revenue is on a decline, and Jennifer has lost some major advertisers to the Journal, and she doesn't think she's going to be able to replace those. So we've reduced the budget there. We've reduced the interest budget substantially because of what's going on with the market. And I think my executive director note on that tells the rest of that story. And then there's a big difference in 2020, CLE, specialization and paralegal all made contributions to the database project, management software project. And it was a total of $100,000 that is shown up as revenue in 2020, but actually it was never spent in 2020, and it will be spent in 2021 to offset the cost of that capital expenditure. But it shows up in the revenue for 2020, but not in the budget for 2021. So that accounts for a lot of the difference in the revenue projections. On the expense side of things, I'm only going to point out a couple of things. First of all, on salaries, I heard what you all were saying earlier this year, and we did not do any raises for the vast majority of the staff. There wasn't a cost of living increase. We had a few adjustments, and this was for people whose level of responsibility was such that they needed to have their salaries increase, or who had been added, some extra duties that hadn't been there previously. On that note, I want to point out for you, one of the people that has been promoted this as of January 1st is Martha Fletcher. Martha has been doing everything soup to nuts in HR, from the just mundane everyday filing and database maintenance stuff, all the way up to helping Joe and I with analysis of pension issues and bigger personnel issues. We have promoted her. She's now going to be our HR manager. And is an exempt employee in that role. And we felt like a salary adjustment for her was mandated by that change and promotion. That's the kind of thing that we did include. There were also 2 new positions. One is a part-time HR clerk to help Martha and do the day-to-day stuff, and an investigator for the TAC program because it's so successful. We don't want it to be a victim of its own success. And I checked with Leonore and she said, what we need is an investigator. We don't need another lawyer. So overall, the increase in the 2020 budget is 1%, the 2021 budget is 1% less than the 2020 budget for salaries, and only 1% higher than our actuals for 2020. And so I'm pretty pleased with that outcome. On the expense end of things, I would note that the software licenses is pretty substantial for 2021. It's $107,000 versus our actuals in 2020 of $52,000. The reason for that is that we're going to have a lot of software licenses that we have to purchase in 2021 as a part of the regulatory management database software project. And Peter can tell you more about that if you want more. The item that's reduced in expenditures is managed services from our actuals in 2020 of 211,000 plus. In 2021, we're projecting 171,000 plus. The reason for that is we think once we get, well, first of all, Peter has been working with our managed services provider to make sure that we're not being overcharged, to reduce our rates when we can, to eliminate some duplications that were there. So we've worked hard on that. And then once the new database is in place, we think there's going to continue to be savings in this regard. And again, I point to Peter if you want more detail on that. The last revenue, those 2 more revenue items I'll point out, bank service charges. We continue to project a large amount there. Our actuals were 209,000. We're projecting 235,000. We think the demand for paying online is just going to increase. It has every year since we first enabled it. But again, that's an expense that we hope to be able to find some ways to reduce in the coming year. Then under building expenses, and this is one where I want to make sure you all are okay with us doing this. In the housekeeping expense, we have added, so the budget in 2020 was with $51,000. The actuals in 2020 were 28,000. The reason for that was when COVID happened, we looked at, what do we need to enable people to come in the office to get their stuff? And the handful of people here work. What do we need clean to do that? But apart from that, let's just cancel all the other custodial services. So we were able to realize some substantial savings there. We've budgeted as if we're going to start back with regular custodial services approximately April. But we've added in here $25,000 to clean the exterior of the building. And I don't know, Colin's been by the building recently, and I don't know if you've noticed, but we've got these really unsightly black streaks that have shown up basically on every ledge, every windowsill. And I'm very concerned that the building exterior is made out of some uniquely manufactured material. I'm concerned if we don't clean it, that it may become permanent. So I hope you're okay with including that money in the budget. It seems frivolous, but I think it's worth it for the long-term value of our building. So I think that's mostly the story on the budget. The bottom line is that while we're projecting a net surplus before capital expenditures, roughly $300,000. We are going to have this substantial outlay for the database software project, $417,000. And the end result will be that we will have the net impact after our capital expenditures for the software project and for the mortgage principal payments. It will be a negative of $458,000 roughly. But the good news was that we added substantially to our cash reserves in 2020. So despite this projection and our concerns overall about kind of the long-term horizon of when we are going to real deficit spending and we have to dip into those cash reserves every year to balance the books, we've been able to extend that horizon a little bit longer. And I'll be glad to answer any questions, Darren.
Okay. Peter, I thought we had agreed that you and Brian, we were going to give y'all a 6-pack and y'all were going to bring your power washer and clean the building.
I've got it ready to go, Darren.
That's still on the table.
A lot cheap. That 6-pack will be a lot cheaper than the budget. So,
My tastes have gone up though, so it's got to be a good 6-pack.
all right, well, we'll move you right up to old Milwaukee. So do we have a motion to? Is there any questions about the budget? Go ahead, Colin.
One thing I was just curious. I know that we had talked last year that we were having some significant savings, and we were going to kind of redirect some of that for the RMS system to bring us up to date. And I guess this is to Alice and Peter both. Do you anticipate after this year that we will have the need for significant capital expenditures in the IT field, or do you think this will have us leveled off for what we need in terms of capital investment for the next few years?
As far as, oh, go ahead, Alice.
No, Peter, I was going to let you.
Okay. As far as IT expenditures, I do think this will be the main IT expenditure that we'll have. We've taken some big steps in the last few years, so this is the culmination of that. If you expand IT to audio visual, I think there might be a request next year to have some additional capital expenditures to refresh the technology in our building. And we will come to you and both you and the foundation for that potentially after we consult with some advisors, because we're hitting the end of life cycle on a lot of the technology in our building. And so there might be some requests for that in 2022.
Okay. All right. Thanks. That's helpful. I give sort of the thought about where things are sort of headed.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Do I have a motion to accept and approve the 2021 budget for the state bar? Colin?
Move the approval.
All right.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Marcy, I heard you say aye, right?
Yes, all right.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought I heard you. All right. Then that's approved. All right. Item number 4 is the consideration of the 2021 budgets for the Client Security Fund Board, the Board of Legal Specialization, the Board of Continuing Legal Education, Lawyers Assistance Program, the IELTA Board, and the Board of Paralegal Certification. As Alice explained to me a little bit earlier, a lot of those boards, except for the LAP board, well, all of those boards are sort of take on and look at their budgets, and then Alice does a review to make sure that they are falling within guidelines. And I think Alice, your recommendation right now is all those appear to be in order.
Yes, sir.
All right. Are there any questions with regards to the approval of those budgets for those particular boards and commissions? All right. Do I have a motion to accept?
Was the amount of the client security fund that was projected to be available for payment of claims $600,000? Is that about what we normally have after we pay expenses?
Yes, that's in line with our past experience, Cole.
Okay, I didn't know if some of this COVID and expenses and interest going down was squeezing us there or not, but I guess that's pretty much driven by the assessment.
Yes.
Correct. Thanks.
Alice, generally speaking, what are they doing with respect to raises for employees?
I'm sorry, you're talking about client security fund?
All of these.
So there are a few, I told you, sort of adjustments based on responsibilities in some of these departments. The client security fund, I don't believe had any.
It did,
Oh, it did? Okay, go ahead. Kate.
yes. Well, because Maria is a budget item for client security fund, and she's one of the ones who had a raise.
Correct, yeah.
And Brian can answer for specialization in paralegal, but I don't think we had any raises.
There
Brian?
weren't across the board.
No, ma'am.
No, there was one adjustment for paralegal. Our managing director, Joy Belk, her salary was increased to be more in line with other folks similarly situated at the bar.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions about the budgets for those boards? All right, do I have a motion to adopt or accept those budgets as written?
So moved.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. So that carries. So those budgets are accepted and adopted. Consideration of some fees with regards to the specialization in the paralegal certification program exam fees. It is recommended that the specialization board would like to increase their exam fee from $150 to $200 and the paralegal board from $50 to $100. And I understand that those fees have not been raised in a number of years, if ever. And so Alice, do you want to just briefly say anything else about that?
No, and Brian's here if he can answer questions, but you are correct. I don't think the paralegal exam fee's ever been increased. The specialization one has been increased, but it's been a long time since there's been an increase. And the only thing these increases will help to offset our costs of offering these exams. We're now doing them online. And so this is just recouping our actual costs for doing that.
I know when I took my exam, they were still asking the specialist to provide questions. And I know now they do it a little more like I guess, sort of the bar exam. They monitor what the questions are and measure them. Is that right?
Well, so we still have a specialty committee for each of the specialties, and they're responsible for updating this exam from year to year, replacing a certain number of questions. But because we're doing them online, we can actually analyze them better. And you can analyze which questions are good questions or bad questions and compare them from results from prior years. So it makes for a much more psychometrically sound exam. Particularly with the paralegal exam, because it's all multiple choice and you can apply statistics more readily to it. But it also applies to improving I think we have 13 different exams now that we offer. And so in the specialty fields, and it helps to ensure that they are better exams as well. So there's some real benefit to doing things electronically.
All right. Are there any regulations or ceilings on how much these can be raised? I mean, we obviously are not in that area, but I mean, do we have a ceiling on that?
No, we don't. We have statutory authority to charge what the council determines to be an appropriate fee.
Okay, all right. So I entertain a motion, if there's no other comments or questions, entertain a motion to raise the specialization board exam fee to $200 and the paralegal examination to $100. Do I have a motion for that?
Move to, we approve those fee increases.
All right. Marcy, you seconding it?
Second, yes.
That's what I thought I heard you say. All right.
Wake me up.
Any further comments or questions about that? All right. I call that to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. All opposed. All right, that carries. Item number 6, I'll just summarize that very quickly. They are the rule amendments that we passed last time basically stated that we could set these fees much like the the fees with regards to the exam fees. The recommendation of staff is to set the fee for the reinstatement of inactive status and the administrative suspension reinstatement fee to $125, which is what it's already at. And also the bottom item, the registration, oh, well, scratch that. And there's a recommendation with regards to a fee for issuing a stock transfer certificate for a professional corporation, and also for filing reports and papers relative to professional corporations and limited liability companies from $2, and the staff recommendation is to go up to $20. $2 isn't hardly enough to pay someone to even process that. So they have a recommendation to go up to $20. And then finally, the recommendation is to the established fee for annual registration for interstate or international law firms is $500, and it's recommended that remain the same. Is there any questions with regards to any of those items, especially the raising the $2 to a $20 fee for the two items listed? Do you want to say anything about it, Alice?
I talked with Jay about it earlier today, and essentially we'd be better off not having a fee at all than keeping it at $2, because it costs us money to open an envelope, pull out a check, and go through the process that we have to go through to deposit that. So if $20 you can't swallow that, then maybe we just need to eliminate the fee altogether.
And there's no such thing as a free lunch, so you need to charge something. So.
Like right. It ought to carry itself.
Yeah. All right. Is there any other questions or discussion about that? And if not, do I have a motion to accept those established fees, or the fees that we're establishing as we already indicated?
Move we accept those fees as requested.
All right. Let's have a second in that.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 So Barbara, you get the, I'm not bothering you with that because you're now
No.
president. So I make sure that, Marcy's got to carry her water bucket, Okay.
Yeah.
So those are all approved. All right. Item number 7 is a discussion of the appointing a subcommittee for the recommendation or for the consideration of a special assessment for the LAP program assessment. And I guess the big question, according to my conversation with Alice, is, do we study it and what does it look like? So I will, Alice, you want to talk about that just briefly?
Yeah, so even though we've had this good experience over the past year, I think we have to be realistic, and that this is kind of an option if we're not able to get the dues bill passed in the next, and it's really like a 5-year horizon. If we're not able to do that, then this would be an alternative way to be able to continue with our existing programs. So I think we should start studying it, and that's really all I'm proposing, is that we get ourselves prepared if this ends up being a better route for us to go, or our only option, that we've done our homework and we're ready to do it when we need to do it. So my recommendation is that you do set up a study committee or subcommittee. I think it should be a subcommittee of finance and audit. I want you guys, I think you all, the officers and the finance and audit committee, should keep this within your purview. I think it shouldn't be something we necessarily do a lot of, promoting or going out there. I think we just need to figure out, like, what would be the process? Who would we need to talk to? How would we go about doing that? Is it really feasible that we would do this? So I don't think it's an issue. I think it's a process question for finance and audit. And I suggest that you appoint a subcommittee and include some outside folks who have some of the maybe political experience that we might need as guidance, possibly somebody that was involved in the Client Security Fund approach to the Supreme Court, although that's been some time ago. But Tom Lunsford, for example, is somebody who has some knowledge about that. We did ask Robin for her idea about sort of a bipartisan group. and not necessarily to serve on a subcommittee to study this, but at least to be people that we could go to for help with this or advice on it. And that's what's behind your tab for number 7. She's listed 2 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and some LAP board members. I think I would suggest that Mark Merritt would be a good person to actually be on that subcommittee, because he chaired LAP at one point in time. He's very knowledgeable about the state bar, obviously, and I think he's knowledgeable and understanding of what our financial situation is. And so you might want to pick a couple of people who are on her list. I think it definitely, the officers need to all be sort of ex officio members of that. And then you might want to pull in some more folks from the council.
All right, we need an action item on that to send it to subcommittee.
I mean, I think you as the chair have the authority to appoint a subcommittee. I frankly think it ought to be a joint endeavor of the officers. So if you have a motion from your Finance and Audit Committee to do that, it indicates that level of support.
All right, well, let's talk about it, I guess. I know we've discussed it among each other before. Is there anybody have any questions or want to make a comment about that potential?
I think that's a good idea. That I think something ought to be studied, and some of those folks off the list, like Mark Merritt and Bob Edmonds, who was on the Supreme Court. I mean, those kind of folks, I think, could be very helpful and influential in trying to assess the right way to go about this and present it.
I agree. And I mean, Alice, I think your analysis is exactly correct. We got to do parallel paths. We can't wait until we're, at the end of our rope and then start this process.
All right. So Alice, maybe I wasn't listening. My wife says I don't very often, but do we need to go ahead and make a motion to just for support?
Yeah, for the minutes, Darren, I think maybe the motion is for the chair of the committee to appoint a subcommittee to study this possibility.
Colin, would you adopt that motion?
Yes, sir. I would. I would move that the chair form a subcommittee to evaluate the concept and process for a LAP assessment.
And Marcy, you're all over it, right? Okay.
I'll second it.
We got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Now, Alice, is this reported to executive committee? Does it have to be approved by them or goes nowhere?
No, it'll be in the minutes.
Okay.
Finance and audit. I mean, we'll be transparent as we always are. Everything about finance and audit is public, but it's not something the executive has to approve.
Okay.
Or the council has to approve.
All right. Because it would be a lot of explaining, and I just feel we're too early on to do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. Item number 8 is the consideration of proposed amendment to state personnel policy. The first one is to add a volunteer day of 7 hours to each employee's paid time off, but it would be taken in 3.5-hour increments, and it would have to be for an approved purpose, like a charitable organization. Any more about that, Alice, you want to talk about?
Just that if you read the policy, we also say you can't be used to volunteer for political activities. We're not going to, breathe down people's throats about this, but we're just going to ask them to provide us with a little explanation of how they intend to use that time. And I did, pursuant to Darren's inquiry, I asked Jaya to give us a ballpark figure on what the cost of this would be to the state bar. It's actually a productivity cost. It's not a direct out-of-pocket cost, but it is a cost. And Jaya has something that she uses to do that evaluation for our vacation paid time off. So Jaya, what did you determine?
It will be about $23,000 for one day.
That's not awful. Not for the goodwill we would be building for. So.
And one other thing I would note, it's only for full-time employees. My thinking was if you're part-time, you have much greater ability to, use your additional time as you see fit for volunteer activities. But sometimes that's really hard for the full-time folks to do that. So this would enable that.
All right. Any other questions about it?
Is it, I'm sorry if I haven't read this carefully. Is it, will whatever they're doing for the volunteer work, will it be known that they are State Bar employees? I mean, is the idea that there is to help promote our reputation or something, or, I mean,
well, no, that wasn't, I mean, the original, we were requested, the employees, there was a request from some employees that we do this, and we were trying to look at kind of really revenue affecting ways to do something for the employees, since we didn't do any raises essentially this year. But that said, Marcy, we can certainly keep track of this and make it part of the public information that we provide. And I think that it does have a real goodwill aspect to it, whether that time is used for legal related charitable activities or not. I think it looks well for us. So we will do that. We'll make it.
I'm not saying it has to be for legal activities, but I mean, just that, I don't know, if you go and you volunteer to soup kitchen or whatever you're going to do. I mean, I just didn't know if it was part of the reason for this was to try to put a good light on or help us with our reputation with the public. And I don't know.
Might or might not. But
Yeah.
I think it's, some of it'll be, a lot of employers do this, and some of it's things like you can go in and volunteer at the school, so I don't see that it would be coming up that they were a member of this, that they work for the State Bar.
So that's not the purpose of this. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds like more work for Martha though, right? That's all right.
I will create a new category, but yes, Marcy, I think it's worth keeping up and putting that total in some of our public information that State Bar employees have volunteered this many hours.
I think so. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it would be some of the things that they volunteered to do.
And even maybe some broad categories like educational, because a lot of them will go to their kids' school or charitable or, various religious organizations, whatever that they do.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine sending Root out to an elementary school to read to kindergartners, but anyway, that could happen, I guess. Okay, so I want to just take all of these under 8 at one time. I'll just talk about the two other categories, and that is to voluntary extend the emergency paid sick leave and the emergency family and medical leave in conjunction with the Coronavirus Response Act, the CARES Act. And I would assume that we're going to get CARES money for that to cover that or not.
Sorry,
No?
Karen, I didn't understand your question.
I think Martha's answered that. I didn't know whether there was any CARES money that was going to be applied for those two items or not.
No, this is from our own revenues. But the CARES Act required employers to provide this leave only through the end of 2020. You all know we're still in some form of lockdown here. It's there to encourage employees not to work if they need to be taking care of themselves or they have to take care of a loved one. And we just felt like it was appropriate to extend that since nothing really has substantially changed. And in fact, North Carolina is worse off than we were in this last spring. So what we want to do is just extend it to the next meeting of the council and kind of see where we are then. We've only had, I think, 2 employees who have, Martha's got her finger, 2 employees who have utilized these since they became effective. And I don't anticipate that we will have a substantial number of employees who utilize them between now and April the 16th, but it just seemed like sort of the humanitarian thing to do. I put.
Was it something like 12 weeks at up to 2/3 pay, something? So when you say extended, like if they'd already used 6 weeks, they'd have 6 more, it wouldn't reset.
No, it doesn't. It does not reset. It's family medical leave is like a rolling 12 months. It's kind of a crazy thing, but Martha keeps track of all that, or the person who's going to report to her will keep track of it. But yeah, it wouldn't be a substantial extension in that regard. And I said, until April 16th, which is the scheduled next meeting of the council, or the next meeting of the council, whichever occurs first, just in case we had some kind of interim meeting of the council. It seems to me it's something we should reassess whenever we have an opportunity.
Well, I'm identifying with still being in 2020, so I want y'all to take that notice. So I should get it anyway without the extension. All right, is there any other questions about that? Do I have a motion that we accept those proposed amendments to the Personnel Committee?
So moved.
Policy, should I say?
Or that we extend it till April the 20, was it 16th or, yeah, April the 16th. of
Yes, sir.
2021.
All right. Marcia, you have a second to
I
that?
second it.
All right. Any other further discussion or questions? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. All opposed?
I took that as a motion to approve all 3 policies.
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
That's
That
what
was
I did.
fantastic.
All items under number 8 was a motion. All right. So Alice, we didn't talk about this, but since we're going to go into executive session for number 9, I just want to quickly do the new business that we mentioned. We've added an item to the agenda, new business. We just want to briefly talk about the April meeting. Alice felt like we were a little behind on making a decision for the January meeting. It would be better if we talked about it now. So I'll open that up for Alice and the rest of the officers to discuss the April meeting, whether it's virtual or in person.
So everything that I've read indicates that we are still many months behind having enough people vaccinated that we're really able to get back together in large gatherings without masks and without social distancing. I do not believe we will be at that point by April, mid-April, which is when our next council meeting is. And it really makes it, we waited too long on the decision about January. One, we could have moved it back and not had it be right on the tail of the holidays, which was my bad. I didn't even kind of make that connection. But it also makes it really difficult for us to figure out what the meeting schedule needs to be and just to lay plans all together. There's planning that goes into a virtual quarterly meeting in the same way that goes into an in-person quarterly meeting. In addition, I think it's better that we go ahead and address this issue with the Marriott, the Crabtree Marriott, and just get that resolved so we know that we're not in a position where they're going to charge us some kind of cancellation fee, or if they threaten to do that, that we have some time to negotiate with them about that. So my recommendation is that you proceed with making this decision now. So that would enable me to deal with the Marriott and with planning the April meeting. And my recommendation is that the April meeting, unfortunately, also be a virtual meeting.
Any discussion about that?
Reluctantly, I agree.
I think that's the way I feel too. I just don't see us getting to a point. Even if we didn't make a decision now, we'd have to make a decision within the next couple of weeks, and I just don't see that changing.
I don't either. I don't think that I don't think the counselors, a lot of them would not come.
So Alice, we don't need an action item on that, I don't suppose. So we'll just let you decide you have the authority with our blessing to move that to a virtual meeting. That'll give Sharon a head start too. That'll be nice to allow her that opportunity. All right. So the last item we have on the agenda is item number 9, and it is a matter concerning the credit card convenience fee consideration. And for that purpose, we need to go into the executive session to speak with our lawyer, Catherine Jean. So I'd entertain a motion pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3 to discuss a matter with our attorney in a confidential setting. So Colin, you have that motion?
Yes, sir. I would move that we move into closed session for that purpose.
All right, Marcy. All right.
Need some lunch.
All right, we're back on live stream, so we are in open session. And Alice, you want to say some parting words before we adjourn?
Well, just on this convenience fee, one of the questions is whether we can make it a flat fee or whether it has to be a percentage fee or whether we have the option there. We actually are charged a percentage fee by both MasterCard and Visa, which is the credit cards that we take. Also, our current online system for credit card payments is pretty clunky, like real clunky. And Jaya and her staff have to constantly monitor it because people get upset and they end up hitting enter, and they end up having multiple charges, which causes us all kinds of problems. So one of the things we're going to have to work through is, can we even do this before we have our new software in place and a better provide e-checks as an alternative? It will give our membership the option. They can know they can pay by credit card, but they're going to be charged a convenience fee, or they can pay by e-check and it will be a nominal fee or potentially no fee. So it would be nice to be able to roll both those out at the same time. The e-checks, we're very concerned about the clunkiness of our online payment service with the e-checks. And it may be we can do convenience fees for bank service charges with our existing system, but we can't do the e-checks with that. So my suggestion is we just work on this. We get the answers that we need from the state information officer, or whoever that is. I'm not really sure why it's that person who has this responsibility, but anyways, we get the answers to our questions, and then we look at how well we can include it in our system before we go forward with this. So I think with regard to executive and the council, I don't think there's anything to act on now, except to the extent that you want to kind of make them aware of it. Now, and I look to Catherine. Catherine, do you think we need any additional authority at this juncture?
No, I don't. I do want to point out a couple of things. So y'all may remember that one of the limitations about these convenience fees is that they cannot go into your general revenue. They have to be in a segregated account, and they have to be used for e-commerce purposes. So to the extent that you're going to have expense associated with coming up with a less clunky way to do these two things, while, you know, it'd be nice to just have a savings, that's not how this is going to work. You're going to have to apply it to that sort of a project anyway. So you will have funds available to defray that expense.
Can you apply them to the charges that we're charged?
No, you can only apply them to basically infrastructure or other sorts of development internally that makes it possible for you to do e-commerce.
That's that would apply to a lot of the things that we're doing already, that we can use those funds to offset some of the managed services budget, some of the licenses budget, all that stuff. We'll investigate that, Barbara. But when I saw that, I just thought, well, we just have to earmark it for uses for things that support our IT infrastructure.
Well, and particularly e-commerce, not just IT infrastructure. It can't be like our case management software.
Right.
It has to relate to e-commerce. And then the other thing is, it is, as I said, across all kinds of state government agencies, there are convenience fees for credit card charges or debit card charges. Typically, they charge less for a debit card than they do for a credit card. Very few of them charge for e-checks. So if we were able to, I know we wouldn't really eliminate the credit card charges that we get from the bank, but we could at least direct that money into something positive for the state bar. But we need to consider whether, if $67,000 is the cost to do e-checks and there's no way to recoup it, is that really good for the state bar? And I don't know the answer to that question. I just know that it is a question that needs to be looked into.
And then one of the last things we want to do is discourage online payments, because there is still a lot of cost, personnel and otherwise, for actual paper checks. And so I think in the long run, we want people to be paying online. So we don't want to eliminate that as people's preference.
Yeah, we just need to find the most economical way to do it.
Right.
It looks like the staff's gonna have to do a fairly sophisticated analysis of this stuff once you talk to folks in state government to be able to say what you think is in the bar's best interest.
Yes, and I'll continue. I really do think that the holidays had something to do with this, and hopefully there's somebody there who I will be able to really get into the details with.
Okay,
I would like to try to move quickly on this because we are spending a lot on these bank service charges. So it may be that sometime before April, there'll be an officers meeting where we talk about it. I think it's an administrative issue. But I'll listen to a different point of view. I don't think it's something that it needs the executive committee or the council's approval for us to do this, because it's really just, again, sort of recouping what we have. And there's some indication that we might be even required to do it. But if you feel like it needs the council approval, we can certainly do it that way. Okay.
I think it's administrative managerial stuff that,
all right. Anything further to come before us? Okay. Barbara, I think